we found ourselves another playable character. You'll never believe it. Never believe it. In the sea of unplayable, non-playable, or pre-playable characters, we found another one. JD, one of my good buddies, JD, he is Cypherpunk cinema. The stories he has and just the knowledge he has of telling stories is incredible, and just his background being in Hollywood and seeing kind of the inner workings of that, and just his personal story is just absolutely incredible, and someone that I connected with right away a year ago when I met him. It's funny how Bitcoin does that to you, and Bitcoiners in general. You just feel like you've known people for your entire life. And it's not that you are weird, it's just you haven't been around the right people yet. So that's at least what I tell myself. So enjoy JD's story. Cypherpunk cinema is really one of those things that unless you're in the Bitcoin space, like truly, or companies, you'll know them, and you'll see what they're doing to push the education and push the bright orange future for all of us. But it's one of those things that the everyday person's not necessarily going to know what goes in behind the scenes, and what goes into it, the hard work that goes into people like JD and Cypherpunk cinema, and what they are doing to push forward sound money and aligning the incentives of all human beings on the planet and giving them freedom. Well, JD is doing that. JD is the one putting his money where his mouth is, and you are going to really get something out of him, his knowledge, and he's really one of the most interesting people in the Bitcoin space. So I am very grateful to be able to share him with you here today. I hope you enjoy. JD, thank you so much for coming on here today and telling a little bit about your story. So I really appreciate everything you've done to help me with my setup, audio, visuals, everything. And that obviously goes right into the core of what you do and who you are. So excited to talk about that here today and have you just tell everyone what you do and what you're looking to do, kind of your past, obviously go into just your upbringing, the past, what your experiences are, work, just kind of what it led you to. I was telling John the other day, John Harv, that Bitcoiners are built in layers, and just all those experiences leading up to where you are today, and everything kind of comes through that same breach. So learning about what it is made you who you are, why you're the Bitcoiner now, and what you're excited about working on, because you got some really cool stuff. And there's a lot of people that we run the same circles, obviously, in Bitcoin land, and there's a lot of people that have a great respect for you. So it's going to be cool to see what you do in the coming years. So thanks for coming on, and yeah, let's start in the beginning and where everything starts for you.
Good stuff. Well, hey man, thanks for having me on, Brandon. I'm very excited to be a part of the inaugural batch of the Bitcoiners with Brandon podcast, or whatever you end up calling this. So I think it's going to be really great to kind of watch you come into your own too as a content creator, and as somebody who understands fully the Austrian / libertarian bent on economics, which we unfortunately don't have enough of in the United States. We have some great pockets in the Bitcoiner world, but from a normie perspective, it's pretty dreary bunch of individuals that are mostly Keynesian. So anyways, yeah, no, but I just watched The Big Short last night too, which kind of colors everything. I was literally watching it, and I'm just like, I can't believe people trust these idiots who were like, we don't have any fewer of the same idiots at the top. But anyways, I digress.
As much as things change, they don't, right?
Oh man, it's so crazy. But that goes directly into what we're talking about and kind of where I'm at and upbringing and everything else like that. So originally from Chicago, from the Midwest. One of the things that we bonded over was kind of being from the Midwest. If anybody's not familiar with the Midwest, it's called the Great Plains for a reason. It is very flat. Like if you take the flattest flat of flat things, it's flatter than that. Like that is the Midwest. And it's a fantastic, amazing place. I love growing up in Chicago. Moved from Chicago to Texas, so I had a pretty, north-south upbringing in just kind of the Midwest. Kind of got to experience both sides of it, and I don't remember how I wanted to get into film or kind of get into this content stuff, but at the end of the day, where I'm at and what I'm doing now is I kind of went to Hollywood, moved to LA, doing the LA thing, like everybody tries to do. After going to school in Texas, I went to Abilene Christian, small Christian school in the middle of West Texas. Got to give ACU a plug because it's one of the best schools, I think, in the country. I've seen a little bit of the woke mind virus start to creep into some of the emails, but for the most part, I feel it's still a pretty good institution of higher education, although most of it is crap. but I digress again. So landing the plane on what we're doing and kind of where I'm at is been in content creation entertainment for over 15 years. Did everything from, being a PA to working my way up to being a producer, to being a director, to being a photographer. Spent 5 years in-house at a large tech company working internationally, kind of helping them scale their international production capabilities. And at that particular organization, it was a decentralized organization. And what was cool is I got to see a little bit of what we as Bitcoiners are going to need to do and the hurdles we're going to have to jump through to start making content that it's kind of more of a push model than a pull model. And so if you're not familiar with those two things, basically a push model is it's kind of normal TV like we have right now where stuff kind of goes out. I guess I'm ranting and I'm going into different things. But at the end of the day, you can push something in front of somebody's face and they can want it or not. And then the pull model is them kind of bringing it out to you. We're kind of in this weird space where it's like if you have like a Hulu or like a Disney Plus, that's kind of a pull model, if you will, because you have somebody pulling that content away from you, if you will. Like you're paying Disney Plus to kind of get that content on your thing versus like traditional broadcast TV is more of a push where when, you're going to watch your old ABC, CBS, NBC, those style content, that style of content is stuff that they kind of push out into the world and hope people watch. That is more of a decentralized way of thinking versus the Hulu, pull model, like the subscription style of stuff. Neither way is wrong, but from a perspective of what works better in a decentralized organization, the push model is absolutely the best because it is a true meritocracy. The pull model can be a true meritocracy as well, but I think my firm understanding of kind of like how you make people do what you want them to do without kind of having to coerce them through violence, kind of like a current financial system that we're currently dealing with.
Yeah, legacy system. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's a very interesting shift in perspective because we used to have that. We used to have in pre-World War II, we used to have a straight up meritocracy society, and even kind of post-World War II for a while. Now we're in this equity woke world where at the end of the day, your skin color actually matters for if we should hire you, and put you in that seat to be a pilot, even though you could be the worst scoring pilot of all the pilots in that class of
pilots. We're not judging by character anymore. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's absolutely a struggle that we have right now that we're dealing with societally, and it's going to have a lot of ramifications, and I think it's going to be a pretty rough thing. But at the end of the day, not having this pitch totally locked up, but where I'm at now and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build this thing called Cypherpunk Cinema. Working with a bunch of other Bitcoiners and trying to figure out what the whole thing looks like. Is it going to be a guild? Is it going to be a company? Is it going to be, what ultimately will it be? At the end of the day, it needs to be self-sustaining in some way, shape, or form. But Cypherpunk Cinema is at the current moment of time, a content creation company that is going to be focused on making amazing Bitcoin entertainment. There's a lot of amazing Bitcoin educators, Robert Breedlove, Nat Burnell, everything Swan does, Preston Pish, Michael Saylor, Lynn Alden. Like I could go down the list forever. Jeff Booth, Greg Foss. But there's not a lot of really great Bitcoin entertainment. I think kind of the first show that's kind of moving just straight into, and I'll call it like the Seinfeld, and you and I actually talked about this, like the Seinfeld of Bitcoin, which is Toxic Happy Hour with Anders and Pubby.
Yes.
It's a show about nothing. It's great. It's highly entertaining. It can kind of go, it's really operating in a great space. Not just Twitter spaces, no pun intended, but just it's kind of operating in this world that it's not fully formed yet. And they are really kind of setting the kind of being the pioneers, if you will, of what this future of content creation could look like. But our approach, or what I'm really trying to focus on, is...
Hey, really quick, I want to annoy the hell out of you with a quick little break to just remind you that we have to share the signal within the noise because the algorithms hate truth. The algorithm hates truth. So we have to do all that we can to spread the signal. The faster we do that, the quicker change comes to the world. We need to be the change we seek to be. What are we doing? What am I doing? What are you doing to build a future? Also, if you want a written version of a lot of what we do here, please go to the description and find the link to our blog, our Substack, as well as you will see many links to either the work or the companies, the places you can find all the playable characters here that we talk to and how you can connect with them. So now back to the show. Thank you.
How do we build a self-sustaining company, or self-sustaining entity of Bitcoiners that can come out and make a lot of really amazing content, really amazing entertainment that ultimately has legs and has tentacles in normie world, with the ultimate goal of planting seeds? Because at the end of the day, there's enough people from an education perspective that if somebody has a Bitcoin seed planted in their mind and they want more education, they can find it. There's a dearth of really fantastic Bitcoin education, but there's very little Bitcoin entertainment. And even, there's a lot of amazing documentaries coming out right now. Like, I know Alana Mediavilla is coming out with a documentary called Dirty Coin, which looks fantastic. That's going to be an amazing piece of entertainment. But again, it's just straight up, it's entertainment, but it's still kind of, Bitcoin in your face, or especially like this is about Bitcoin mining. And, our focus and what we're really trying to do is not necessarily make it stuff that's like Bitcoin, 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 Bitcoin. It's like a beautiful cinematic movie that takes place in a Bitcoin world, or a beautiful, podcast that could just be a bunch of people talking about sports, but the undertone is Bitcoin, or whatever it is. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. Super stoked, super excited.
Could it be like even Tomer Strolites, the generational I can't even think of the name now, but his not generational wealth. I can't remember the 15-minute video, what it's called now. But his, future forward video of what the world will be like, obviously what the past was like in fiat, and then what the world will be like in the future. For some reason I want to say generational wealth now, but anyway, Swan
I think
has
it's
that
This
15-minute
Machine
video.
Green. Is that one, or is this
That's the other one. They just dropped that like a month ago. This is the one
Got
that
it.
dropped in 6-8 months ago. But it's,
I know which one you're
gosh,
talking about. I can't remember the name of it.
Phenomenal. Yes.
It is fantastic. I actually watched it, and it's like, the cool thing about coming, and I'm a pretty baby Bitcoiner. I was just orange pilled in Miami of last year. There's no lack of content to ingest. I'm in the middle of the Sovereign Individual, which is crazy what those guys predicted back in 1998. I'm almost done with the Mandibles. I've read Jeff Booth's book. I do recommend for new people who are getting in, if you're just a baby Bitcoiner, the Fiat Standard and the Bitcoin Standard in that order, because I think you can really get a good perspective if you're not a huge Bitcoiner on the problems of today. If you start with the Fiat Standard first, because it really kind of unpacks a lot of these big struggles that we're dealing with. And then the Bitcoin Standard will just continue to orange pill you and push you further down the rabbit hole and make you question everything you've ever learned, which is kind of what Bitcoin does.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's funny. It's I have the Bitcoin Standard, but I haven't even read it. I know it's one of the probably most referred books. People that maybe possibly has orange pilled the most people, that book. It's funny too, because I, being in the real estate industry for 12 years, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad only like a few years ago. But it was actually another Kiyosaki book that I had read with Donald Trump. Actually, Why We Want You to Be Rich, like 14 years ago, 12 years ago, that actually like orange pilled me down that road, and then led me to gold and silver, like Maloney's books, and then eventually led, a number of years later to Bitcoin. But I still haven't read like the classic, in one of the classics in the space. So it's so funny. I have to read it though, and because I've read a bunch of others, but I've just circled around his book for some reason. I don't know why I continue to do that, but that's too funny. Well, going back really quick though, what was your before all this, like, you're young, what was your experiences with money growing up, in Chicago growing up and stuff like that, just kind of your introduction to money, the road that led to Bitcoin, the road that led you up into a year ago, today, almost a year ago today, being at Bitcoin 11 months ago, Miami.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I remember the first class I ever took where I balanced a checkbook was my junior year of college. And
Crazy.
my parents never talked about money. The first time I ever talked to my parents about money was in high school when my mom called me crying because she needed money to keep the electricity on. My parents never let us know when they were in kind of financial just straits. Um, to their credit and to our detriment, I would say. At the end of the day, I think there's a lot of value in shielding your kids from some crap. But at the end of the day, I think it does them a disservice if they don't understand you're struggling. I think there's a lot of power. I grew up Catholic originally, and now I'm just a
Yes.
normal Christian, as I will. I have nothing against Catholicism, actually. I actually really have a lot of great respect for Catholicism. Looking at it from the outside, looking in, the structure, the rigor, a lot of the just sacraments and actually the reverence for the sacrament and kind of the transubstantiation. If you're not familiar with that word, that means basically the blood, the wine and the bread physically becomes the body and blood of Christ. And the reverence for that, I think there's actually a lot of really great respect that goes into it. I think that's one of the things that's fascinating about Bitcoin when everybody kind of gives Bitcoiners crap, like you can't say Bitcoin is religious, but I'm like, kind of is. Like Bitcoin gives the same kind of reverence to value and to worth that the Catholics do to, the body and the blood. Huge tangent,
Yes.
but I think there's
But
a lot
Bitcoin
of
makes you think like that. That's the point, though.
yep. And so I think landing the plane on the question you had of where did I grow up with money and how did I kind of get on this path? I think growing up Catholic originally and understanding routine and understanding rigor and understanding the value of some of those things, now being able to really fully appreciate it, standing and looking at it from the outside looking in. But I think having some of those things really helped me understand like the value of hard work and the value, I grew up, very, very white bread, very, Wonder Bread family in the middle of the Midwest. I had no idea that tomatoes came in different colors until I'd moved to California, which is crazy, 2010, but a true story. Also, I love my mother deeply, but I married an Italian woman and I didn't know that you weren't supposed to eat
Oh,
spaghetti with a fork and a knife. Uh, until I married an Italian woman. Al dente is a thing. But anyways, um, I think not having any exposure to money. And then the first big thing that really happened to me was when I was in college. I had I took out all these student loans, did all the dumb stuff. I was like, oh, I was approved for FAFSA. Awesome. I get a bunch of loans. I can go to college. Like I was the, first one in my family to go away to college. I think my father might have, but I mean, like of my brothers, I've got several brothers, and all my brothers went to school, community college. Great for them. They're all kicking ass. They're all kicking butt and doing it great. Um, just doing a great job in what they're doing. But for me, I was just, had bought fully into the trust of the system. And they told me that I could get these things. I could get a credit card. I think my first credit card had like a 39% interest rate, something stupid, something
holy cow.
absolutely stupid. I bought a MacBook Pro with that credit card, and then just like, I like looking back at it now, I probably paid like 20 grand for that laptop or something stupid.
It's incredible. Interest rate apartheid, as Max and Stacy say.
It's
Interest rate
crazy.
apartheid. I think I have one of mine's like 30% now. And I've never paid a day late, never held any debt on it, nothing for like 8 years I've had, or 10 years. Like,
Yep.
what?
And
Insanity.
so it was crazy when I went to college. I did an internship in Nashville at a production company, worked with Carrie Underwood and Kelly Clarkson and all those things. But the top line was um, the guy I was living with, a total God thing too, the whole way the thing that happened. But the guy I was living with, a guy named Chris, we were just talking one day, and Chris was like, do you have, we just started talking about debt and just talking about money and talking about student loans, talking about all that stuff. And then he introduced me to a guy named Dave Ramsey, which I fully believe Dave Ramsey's the best, like, first wake up call for anybody trying to learn about money. Because he makes it super simple. He talks to the lowest common denominator. And yes, it is absolutely hogwash for anybody who has any financial acumen. But for somebody who has no footing, it's a great place to start.
Yeah. Yep.
Great place to start. You can get the baby steps. You can get, it's easy to follow. He makes it simple, just kind of good stuff. And so Chris had me cut up my credit cards right there. He's like, if you cut off your credit cards right now, I won't charge you any more rent for the rest of the summer, which he did. And then he just basically started me on this path to do it. And then when my wife and I got married, we did our total, and we ultimately ended up paying, like, I think it was almost $400,000 in student loans and other stupid off,
Incredible.
you know,
Good for
just
you
with our
guys.
jobs and stuff like that. So it was crazy. So, yeah, even after paying all that stupid tax, I still didn't have a firm and full understanding of money. And I worked in tech in San Francisco. And I like missed Bitcoin, which is the dumbest thing in the world because the Bitcoiners are my people, and like literally didn't even know. Actually, yeah, there's a really famous Bitcoin personality. I won't go into who it is, but I worked with them at the tech company that I worked with, and um, it's just crazy knowing that they got orange pilled, while we were working at that company. Also, I had a like random connection too that I worked with that I like went to a rival high school of that guy, and actually we worked on a project together, a thing called Shatter Dreams, which is an anti-drinking and driving thing. But it was just kind of crazy, um, like all the overlaps and how small the world is. But ultimately, missed Bitcoin multiple times, and then finally was orange pilled in Miami by a buddy of mine, and then Texas Slim when I heard him speak at Katie the Russian's Underground Citadel.
Yeah, that's very cool. That is very cool. And that's the path, right? I mean, that's the path leading up to Bitcoin. Everyone enters really through the same breach, the same doorway, the that kill zone. You have to. It's buds. Like I like there's always a part of me that will wish I had gone through buds through Navy SEAL training, basic underwater demolition SEAL training. And that's you have to get through Hell Week. You have to get through that gauntlet in order to respect what you have really at the end of the day and have that camaraderie. And that's where Bitcoin is like the social layer of Bitcoin is so incredible, really at the end of the day. So that is, yeah, just very cool. And I love hearing your story because it's important. And the kids decide as well, having a 6'4", 2-year-old and a newborn myself, just understanding that it's so broken from the ground up that how do we, and you and I have talked about this relentlessly of, selfishly, a lot of things we're doing right now, they're for our kids or they're for ourselves, honestly, so we don't go crazy. We're reading the same books over and over again. There's only so many books out there that teach freedom and liberty and responsibility and accountability. And that's really the Bitcoiner's ethos at the end of the day is truth, reality. And there's only so much. So that's why we've embarked and started creating a lot of our own stuff, whether it's books, cinema, entertainment, you name it. And you and I doing that, and then partnering with other people that are doing it because it's starting, but there's just not much out there in general, not even Bitcoin land, but just in general. You get on YouTube and the kids have very little to actually, sink their teeth into. So it really is incredible. So it's a selfish endeavor in a way, just so we don't drive ourselves crazy reading the same books over and over again. But I think it's so important because it's, who controls the youth control the future at the end of the day.
Yep,
So,
yep, yeah.
you could touch on that too. And then the other thing I was going to ask you is just, maybe some of the things that you were studying and how you kind of got into cinema as well, obviously film, cinema, and just that aspect of things and bringing that, because I told you and Mike, Bitcoin shooter. I mean, I remember, again, I'll always remember this. Excuse me. At the end of the day, we were at Pacific Bitcoin last year and just saying, like, you guys are going to really change the world. Like the story makers, the filmmakers, like those will be the ones that really change the most amount of people. So talk about that. You can comment on any of that, but then also just how you got into cinema and just where that kind of came into and elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many things to unpack. I think the top line I also want to start with. I say top line a lot. That's one of my things. Boil the ocean. I say that too.
I love
Which
it.
people think it's a fruitless
Find myself
task,
saying it more now. Yeah.
It's the best. I personally think you can boil the ocean. You can boil it away, and then all you have left is exactly what like you want to see. So when people say you're using it wrong, you're right. But I am an optimist when it comes to that. And so, my personal goal, which is crazy, is to get people to watch less TV. And
Love
I
that.
think if we can get enough amazing content in front of them that has that message in there, we can win. Culture is downstream of myth. And the myth makers, Hollywood, the media, the myths that we read, reality, perception is reality, and perception is shaped by myth, and myth is shaped by entertainment. It's shaped by where you spend your time. I was reading last night, I'm working on the pitch deck for Cypherpunk Cinema, and, one of the quotes that really, really struck me was one by Heraclitus from 475 BC. And I love ancient wisdom. The Bible is an amazing book of wisdom. Even if you're not a Christian, the wisdom in the Proverbs and the Psalms, and then just from, Christ's own teachings is fascinating. But two quotes that really hit me were one, and the whole thing here is like myths shape everything. But day by day, what you choose, what you think, and what you do is who you become. And that's Heraclitus from 475. And then the other one, that's the truth. You are where you spend your time. You are who you hang out with. I remember in college,
100%.
There's a whole thing of like our welcome week thing you went through, and I can't remember any of the things, but I remember the middle one was, surround yourself with good people, right? And that's the key. You are the sum total of the 5 to 10 people you hang out with the most. As men, I think we struggle a lot in the modern world. I don't know how it is in the Midwest, but here in California, like California is crazy. California is the most puritanical place. I'm living in California, by the way. The most puritanical place I've ever been from a perspective of scheduling. Let me unpack that. In the Midwest,
I'm intrigued.
I don't remember ever locking my door. I'm sure it's not the case anymore, but I just remember never locking my door. And it was, we were always, we were latchkey kids. We would just kind of go out and go play and go do whatever, and it would just be home for dinner. Like that was it. That was kind of the key. We were always out, playing kickball in the cul-de-sac or whatever it was. California doesn't do that. California, everything is scheduled, everything is a play date, everything is whatever. And also people in California, they live and die by their schedules. And it's puritanical from a perspective of like, it's so regimented. It's so focused on, if it's not on this piece of paper, it doesn't happen. And even worse in LA, San Francisco is much better about this, but in Los Angeles, people will schedule 2 and 3 things over each other with the full intent of not doing 1 to 3 of those things. So they will intentionally just leave people hanging. It's just a part of the culture here. It's a part of the way entertainment kind of just evolved. And I'm very excited because the value of time will change as we move on to a Bitcoin standard. And that just won't happen anymore. If somebody wastes your time, you are never going to spend time with them ever again. And
that's incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's super nuts. But then it just goes into what I was saying about really wanting to make TV and make content that is value add and ultimately driving people towards getting outside. I'm a sucker for a good piece of reality TV. Select reality TV game shows. Like I think Survivor's great. The last 2 seasons have gone a little woke and it's a little frustrating, but it's always ironic to see kind of the woke people get knocked out. I like The Amazing Race. I think those are game shows that could be really, really interesting to parlay into a Bitcoin world. I was just thinking from a Bud's perspective. I love ideating too, and then just trying to figure out what we can do. But like, it could be awesome to do a Bitcoin Bud show where it's like a whole coiner boot camp where we literally prep people for being whole coiners in the Bitcoin future, when it's like, a whole coin is generational wealth.
Or you're prepping them the opposite way to live in a fiat destitute world in about 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah, I think 5. I think we're
you have to become a Navy SEAL to live in that world. So sorry.
No, that's fiat. The truth. That's the truth. I think it's going that, I have some printing devices, that I'm looking to start getting into for, some anyways.
This rabbit hole.
R.I.P. J Stark. But yeah, so many different things. I think, at the end of the day, Bitcoin has changed everything about what I want to do, what I want to be, where I want to go, and how I want to raise my kids. And for Cypherpunk Cinema, that comes into, I want to make stuff that pushes this hyper Bitcoinization into the normie conscious and starts, even if people don't buy Bitcoin, starts a resurgence of low time preference and an understanding, I want to build cathedrals again. That's the top line.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We have
Citadels,
not
cathedrals. Yeah,
we've not
absolutely.
built cathedrals in 100 years,
Yeah.
maybe more, because all we're building right now is just, regulated garbage. When we got our house, we had to redo all the electrical. Our house was built in 1920. Like, why do we have to have one outlet on every single wall, X, arbitrary number of feet apart, everything else like that? Because it's just a racket. Somebody's working with the copper companies, is working with
Yes.
the person
You need to
selling the
justify
outlets.
the city inspector's job and everything. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yep. So
It's
when we get back
incredible.
to a low time preference world, I think it'll be great. Excuse me, I think it'll be great. And
Yeah.
I think Bitcoin will push us into that, and I think governments will collapse. I think
Same.
the world will get smaller,
Yep.
but it'll get
Less
bigger.
nation states. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
We have
more.
two
I mean, is
countries with
either going to be
200 countries.
less? Yeah, there's either going to be like 20 left or there's going to be like 2,000. Like there is no in between anymore. It's either you're going to have completely decentralized, I think thousands of little nation states, or you're going to have 20 total or something in the next,
Yep.
a couple decades.
Yep. Yep. We're gonna go more tribal again, which is a little exciting because if I think some problems will take care of themselves. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's very hard to reproduce if you cut off your reproductive organs and or mutilate your reproductive organs and try to procreate. You can't. So the only way you could try to procreate your ideology is by, planting it in other people. But I think if enough people can recognize, oh, hey, that's literal death. I don't want that. I think it's going to be a really interesting it's going to be a really interesting new era we get into when actual truth and scientific truth and biological truth wins out. Because at the end of the day, your perception is your reality, but your perception is not truth. May
That's
not
so
be
true.
truth. May not be truth.
Yes. And that's, again, it's Bitcoiner ethos, right? And that's constantly checking yourself, trying to lower your hubris and become more humble so we can see those blind spots and check our biases, because we all have biases. So it's constantly checking that. What are some other like mentors that you look up to? And it could be in the, in your genius zone. It could be, in the film, the world of, art, film, or it could be, financial. It could be in the macro space, I guess maybe the more mainstream by Bitcoin space, wherever. Who are some people that you, I guess, looked up to for years, like the last couple of decades, and then also like recently? Who are some people that in the last year you're like, oh wow, I love this person?
It's funny. I had a list of people that I wanted to work with, and at one point in time, I wrote that list down, and like half of those people have died, and so I've constantly
Oh
stopped
boy.
making that list.
Oh boy.
Philip Seymour Hoffman was on it. Anton Yelchin was
I
on it.
love him. Yeah.
Robin Williams was on it. I did have the pleasure of working with
Mhm.
him, but there
Okay.
were what's his name? Heath Ledger was on it. So this was a list that I
Wow.
wrote way back in the day. But I wrote this list, and then just slowly everybody fell off that list. Chris Farley.
Wow.
So as you can tell, I wrote this list a long time ago.
That's
And
incredible.
I was just
You
like,
had a keen
well,
eye for people to use, though. That's for sure. That's
yeah, I just loved what each of them brought. And I think going to your thing about artisans and what they are, what I have learned about myself is I don't know if I'm the greatest director in the entire world. And I say that as like, I don't even know I don't know what God has for me, but I know what I'm very good at. I'm very good at creative optimization. I'm very good at breaking the creative problem apart to solve it. And so from a mentor perspective, I love seeing people who can do that from the artistic angle versus just the logistical angle, which is I think where my superpower is. Christopher Nolan is just somebody that I highly admire. I'm very excited for Oppenheimer. I think he's probably the only true director still in Hollywood at the current moment in time, because everybody else is just doing sequels. Nobody else is doing original
yeah.
content. Nobody wants to put any money behind any original content, and I think that's the big
So true.
goal that I would love to see for Cypherpunk Cinema is really being a part of that charge in new original content. And I think from a Bitcoiner perspective, I really do respect, the list is going to be the same as everybody else, but I respect Saifedean. I really respect a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. I could go through and just make a huge list. Somebody new that's on my radar that I really do like is Maddox. I really do think he's a true artist, a true artisan. I would love to, talk with him and learn from him a little bit. My friends in, the Bitcoin circle are also true artisans in their own aspects of their craft. But I think at the end of the day, the indelible mark that I hope to leave on, Bitcoin as a, as an industry, if you will, is leading the charge to building cathedrals of content. That's it. Things that people actually are taking time to think out and work through and really make well, still trying to do it on a lower time horizon. The average Christopher Nolan film takes like 4 years. I don't know how much longer the infrastructure of the world is going to survive, so we kind of need to start laying really good roots now to do some amazing things like that. But yeah, I think it'd be awesome if 100 years from now Cypherpunk Cinema still exists, and maybe it's in the form of a guild. I think that's where we're kind of going back in that. And a friend of mine, Mr. Clownworld's the reason, kind of where that thought process has kind of been mind virused in me. Is I think we're probably going to go back to this artisan guild world where it's more of an apprentice master style relationship, which I think will be great. And I think we're going to be in these more micro economies where, fediments could be an interesting thing, when we have 2,000 countries and, all countries are using the same base layer for monetary transactions, Bitcoin, but they could have, different variables for their own small federated Lightning network or whatever it is. Yeah, I think we're on the precipice of something crazy. And it's pretty exciting.
And it's so cool, and you kind of touched on it earlier too a little bit. And then right there was what maybe kind of circle back around to this. But again, just the people we know, you and I being kind of examples of this in a way too, and a lot of the people we know is people that have left jobs, left careers, left other stuff to come into this world. And if that's not saying something, I don't know what is. I mean, what other? I don't know. I'm trying to think of what other. I don't know if you call it whatever it is, movement, social layer. I don't know what you want to call it, but like I don't know anything else where people are in droves actively leaving their prior life or businesses or whatever it is to like come into this space and say, oh, this is the biggest problem in the world that needs to be fixed. Fix the money, fix the world. And everyone comes and brings their different talents and unique abilities to this world. It's what's so fascinating to me in the Bitcoin conference. And you and I talked about this. This has come up many times. Brian Dement just talked about it on one of the Bitcoin, I'm trying to think, Cafe Bitcoin the other day, working with the Orange Pill app, and he was talking about, and Alex was too. I mean, there were a bunch of people talking about, you might have even been there, I can't remember, but it was, just like that world of Tomer's video, Bitcoin is generational wealth, of what the world will look like being at Pacific Bitcoin when there's 10 of us there at the end of the conference. No one wants to go home. Like, we're being kicked out of the place by security guards because no one wants to go home. That is a peek into the future. Everyone's paying for everything in Bitcoin through QR codes or whatever. Like, it's just this world that everyone's there and everyone's on the same team. That's what's amazing. Everyone's here. And if one person succeeds, that means that we succeed too, because we all benefit because we all are using Bitcoin. We're all on the same network. I mean, it's truly the most mind-blowing thing. We've all been to many business conferences, but I've never been anything like that in my life. Whether it's Bitcoin Miami, Pacific Bitcoin really kind of stands out, obviously, the most because it was smaller, more intimate. But it was just like, wow, this is the future, and everyone is here using their different talents to come here and do this. And you and I are examples of that. So it just makes me think of the connection a lot of us kind of had in meeting each other, really, and seeing that firsthand, just being blown away. And like, wow, I knew I need to be here, and I could feel that calling, that pull, and it just confirms it.
Yep. I think what's really fascinating about that too is I don't know how good Miami is going to be this year, and I say that knowing last year
Agreed.
we were kind of in the midst of a bull market, and then the bottom kind of fell out of it right afterwards. And especially with FTX and Celsius and now Grayscale, what might be happening with DCG. I think Miami's going to be different, but I'm excited for that because it's going to be the more hardcore folks who are there. That being said, I don't think we're going to get all of them there. I think we'd be hard pressed to see Eric Case in there again. I think we'd be hard pressed to see, I'd love to see Eric Case in there again, but he was a part of my orange filling too when I was at Miami, kind of talking with him for a minute and him kind of fully unpacking a lot of things.
I talked with him a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to have him come on in a few weeks. Where I don't know if I was telling you that, because I think his story is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And you would get a kick out of it too, because of some of your background and your wife and everything, and kind of how he grew up and being like the other side of like how I grew up. And that's kind of, I was like, hey, I would love for you to come chat with me about this, because we grew up on like different sides of the tracks, like mentally, or like, I don't know how to say that, just like politically, mentally. So I would love to like dive deeper in that. Yeah, ideologically. And I think that's fascinating. And his story is like, again, someone like you being able to tell stories of people like him, where I think like that captures the most amount of people, where it's like his story told by great storytellers, people like you, like that's what's crazy. Because like my story is like, I'm a jock, I play hockey, great. Like it's like sweet, like it's very different from someone, hey, I had to like the scales falling from my eyes in a way, and I don't want to put words into his mouth, but it's just very like, you can tell. And he's like, yeah, like I still have trouble to this day with my, I don't know. Again, I'm not going to say conversion necessarily, but just like the way he sees the world now, he's like, I kind of struggle with it still from the way he grew up. So it's unbelievably fascinating. So anyway, side tangent, but
no, it's, I think back on, my oldest best friend, who, we've kind of fallen off just because he doesn't live in the States anymore, but his name's Chris. And, I didn't realize how ideologically different Chris and I were. And that has never been a problem for me. And I think that's one of the things, I tell this story too, is an interesting one, but like when I was working at the tech company I was working with, we had a moment where I went to Chicago and the tech company had a presence in San Francisco, Chicago, Nashville, actually all over the world, but big one in Chicago. So we go to Chicago, and I went to Chicago with some native Californians. And it was fascinating to me because I grew up in Chicago, if you grew up in Chicago, and I grew up in the burbs, but if you grew up in Chicago in any way, shape, or form, like you grew up with everyone. It was a menagerie of color, a menagerie of diversity, all these different types of people, be it, socioeconomic status, what have you, religions, yes. I remember
real
I didn't have
melting
any
pot.
Total true melting pot. And I remember when we went to Chicago the first time with proper Californians. California is the first time also that I experienced like true, like straight up racism. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. I knew I was in Texas, and I was like, even in Texas, like people in Texas were like, there was like a divide between like Texans and Mexicans and a couple of there's but it was just kind of more of like, I think the frustration there was people coming from whatever country and trying to make Texas that country. Yeah, I kind of agree with Texans. Like, if you really love Mexico, or if you love Spain, if you love whatever, and this is not in a racist sense, but like, if you really love that country, go back.
Right.
Like, exactly. This is not that country.
No one's forcing you to stay here. Yeah.
No one's forcing you to stay here. Go back. Because the point of the United States is if you want to be here, you are an American. Period. I firmly believe that.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the issues we're having with our culture. But landing the plane on the Chicago side. So get Chicago. And I just remember walking in that office and sitting down with some of the people from California. And they're like, JD, do you notice anything about the office here? And I like looked around and I was like, I mean, they have better food. There's more artwork on the walls. Like, I don't know. And then they're just like, there's a lot of black people here. And I was like,
no way.
Oh, I didn't even realize that. Yes, at a tech company.
Wow.
It blew my mind. And I was just like, no, like Greg is just a really good worker. I was like, it doesn't really matter. Like, I didn't even see that Greg was black. Like, I mean, yeah, I saw that Greg was black. I'm not blind, but at the same time, I'm like, it didn't phase me. It was
Wow.
just like, no, Greg is a really freaking badass at his job. Like, he's not here because he's black. He's here because he's great at his job. And that was the
Incredible.
first time, and the irony too is like the people I was talking with were the wokest, most liberal people in the entire world.
Always.
And love them dearly as people, but just the irony of the lack of true insight
Yes.
and their lack of
Awareness.
understanding.
Yeah.
Lack of awareness.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, if we're gonna, talk about planes, the Boeing 737 Max crashes that happened. I think 2 of the flight crews were African, like literal African from Africa.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that African flight crews are bad. They dug into it, and it was literally a problem with the way the altimeter, something like that. It was basically a software issue with the altimeter that if they ever got into a particular situation, the pilot could not override it, and the software caused them to crash. So I go to that and I say that and bring that up as an example of, at the end of the day, looking at one factor. Oh, well, we could make the assumption that black pilots are bad pilots. No, if you dig into the problem, there was an issue with the software and that needed to be fixed. Be that at those airplanes were constructed in China, doesn't matter. But anyways, yeah, I know that was a wide tangential thing where I'm going to this. There was a meritocracy is what we should be organized as, and we used to be organized as. And the Californians had a giant blind spot in understanding that the Midwest still operated in a, I would say, mild meritocracy. There is also a larger African American population in Chicago than there is in Los Angeles and San Francisco. So there's also that. But it was just ironic to me that these people who are all about diversity and inclusion, which more so meant for who you're sleeping with, to them. And now I'm like, no, it really just matters. Can you do your job?
Yep.
Are you the best at your job? Nothing else really matters on top of that.
It's truly remarkable, and we all have our biases, I guess, if you will, and but again, it goes back to Bitcoiners constantly trying to, and this is where I go back to, I've said this a lot just in the past of, and you and I probably even talked about this, but we've all arrived to here again through the same gauntlet, going through the same path. It's like we didn't wake up one day saying like, "Hey, I'm a genius. I'm a Bitcoiner. This is a way of the future." Like, it's not like that. Like, we literally have gone through all these experiences and gone down that path. I mean, I started in
usually
in
involves getting punched in the face,
exactly,
in some way, shape, or form.
Yes, in the politics, and then was playing hockey growing up, getting in fights, and that was reality. It was just like that was real life, and it's just like, hey, if you do something, or you might get punched in the face, right? Like you said, and then instead of seeing the crash, and we're a similar age, so seeing the crash firsthand, being in college, and then going into like, oh my, I gotta figure this out. Creature of Jekyll Island, finding out, oh, there is a game being played because it smelled like there was being a game being played, and then getting into real estate and 14 years ago, gold and silver, and then this Bitcoin thing, like this is the end of the train. This is fixing the money, fix everything. So it's like this whole path you have to go down. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to be woke today, right? Hey, I think I'm a genius. I changed my identity overnight. That's not how it works. Like it has to be this path. It's this progression where you have to go through this gauntlet to get through. And again, we all go through it. We all go through it. And speaking of that, is there anything that because again, the GFC was one of the huge turning points in my life. The 2008 election, actually, the GFC and like the Obamacare getting passed, rammed down everyone's throats. And then the Jonathan Gruber, like right after that, coming out, the 1-minute clip still on YouTube today saying, yeah, like the stupidity of the American voters, how we got that passed. Lack of transparency is a great political tool. And still, up to this day, I mean, people don't care about anything anymore. Just every day there's new truths that come out and no one seems to care. So what were some of these like big ahas for you over the last like number of years that, again, from that financial side in Bitcoin, that have been like, wow, that really, it was an inflection point in my life?
Investing in an NFT company.
Tell me more.
Yeah, so I didn't really firmly understand economics until I invested in an NFT company. I was a shitcoiner before I was a Bitcoiner, and the guy who orange pilled me told me the entire way through, "You're gonna regret this," and I was like, "No, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're absolutely right. 100% right." It was literally the Simpsons meme where the guy steps on the rake and just keeps going back and forth, because that was me for like 2 weeks, just stepping on rakes constantly. And I had never had to come face to face with losing, just straight up losing, thousands and thousands of dollars, gone, because it's like, even if you have a stock, like I've got some stocks that are in the red, and, you're never actually locking in your losses until you sell. Now, granted, you should sell at a certain point, but in this particular case, it was just evaporated and gone. And so that, I think, is what caused me to dive in more to the different things. Because I was actually thinking about this after watching The Big Short last night. I was in college at the time, 2007, 2008. And I remember reflecting, I was thinking about this last night, reflecting on what was going on with my parents, what they were going through, the job transitions, seeing too that there were, I think it was between 5 and 7 million people who were out of work. I watched something with Representative Kennedy talking to Jay Powell yesterday at a Senate hearing, and he took him to task, and I was like, good on you. At the end of the day, all politicians are swamp creatures, but at least sometimes you get some good questions in there. And what was fascinating was him unpacking at the end of the day, in order to get to the 2% inflation number that the Fed is trying to maintain, that would be a 10+% unemployment rate. So that roughly means we're in somewhere in the neighborhood
rate,
of,
by the way.
Yes.
Not real employment, government employment.
Yeah.
Rate.
But in order to get to that, we're going to be at a 10+% unemployment rate, which means we'll probably be in a real unemployment rate of 20 to 40 million people.
Yeah.
If people listening don't understand what that means, let me put it into context. 2008, again, I told you a second ago, between 5 and 7 million people out of work. Okay. Just imagine 3 times that.
Carnage.
What
carnage.
happens? What happens at that point? Because then, you have people who are desperate. You're going to get to a point where desperation is going to click in. And so, I was talking about this on BTC Sessions podcast with, on Why We Are Bullish.
Yeah. Yep.
At the end of the day, if you don't have avenues to talk with your neighbors, go ask for sugar, go ask for whatever. If you don't actually have a garden,
100%.
if you live in an apartment, start an herb garden. I know that sounds weird, but start an herb garden. Start a garden with whatever you can, with wherever you are, because that garden will become currency. It will.
Yes.
When we get into this place where things are difficult, currencies are going to be Bitcoin. They're going to be things that are not controlled. It's going to be Bitcoin. It's going to be bullets. It's going to be bread, and it's going to be gold. Like gold is not going away. I don't, I'm not a Bitcoiner who's like,
100%.
Gold is bad. Like, I actually don't think gold is bad. I think gold is actually great if you want to trade with boomers and if you live in an area where there's a lot of boomers. Like, you should
People still have the money. Yeah, exactly.
You should have some gold. I have an allocation in gold.
Yes.
You should have some gold. But at the end of the day, if you aren't preparing and you aren't thinking about the what if, you're literally leaving yourself up a creek without a paddle and no insurance policy.
100%. Yeah, 100% agree. It's being prepared just in general. It's being an upstanding citizen. It's being ready for anything, natural disasters, it could be anything, right? Man-made disasters. And that way you're not the people. And I say this all the time, community is the number one thing, right? And you just mentioned it. Community is the number one thing in a preparedness or survival situation, hands down. And it's being the people that can survive it and help other people. That way you're not one of the people trampling other people in a store, trying to hoard things and being part of the problem. So that thing is so close to my heart, and just being prepared in general, doing your little part, because everyone does 5 or 10% extra. Just think of how the rippling effects that has. It's incredible. So well said. We have a few minutes left here. I wanted to touch on quick, just again, circling back around. We'll dive into some more of the stuff as we go here, obviously in the future, and getting updates, obviously, on what's happening with Cypherpunk Cinema and some of the projects we're working on. But there's, like we said, mentioned before, the books we're working on, Bitcoin trading cards. There's different projects you're working on. Thank God for Bitcoin, stuff like that. Why don't you touch on that stuff for a minute? Just on some of the things that you're doing, some of the things you're excited for, and then where people can find you and reach out to you and chat.
Yeah. So, and thank you again so much for having me on to do this. This
Yeah,
has
of
been
course.
great. Um, right now, Cypherpunk Cinema, where we're at, is trying to find funding, trying to, we're pushing the ball up the hill with no money, and if we can get some capital, then we're going to try to turn that into a money-making engine that can then roll into the greater moonshot project. So we're going to start with a push towards making, you know, low, I'll call them like low effort, not from like, work's going to be put into them, but lower production effort content, podcasts, YouTube, and then shorter style documentary stuff, um, to get some sponsorships and get kind of stuff moving to then roll into like full feature length docs and then television and then feature films. That's kind of the trajectory. That's kind of what we're working on. In a perfect world, we would try to have, 5 to 10 of those podcast documentary or podcast YouTube series. I'm using YouTube as a thing. I would love, honestly, as much of it to be just on Nostr native, um, as possible, and see if the Zap economy, I think it's there, but just see if that kind of content can really make this whole engine go. Just trying to be 100% outside of the system, but we'll kind of see
Yes.
where that lands. But starting with that, getting a bunch of those things in there, really trying also one of the things with Cypherpunk Cinema is trying to empower and enable other Bitcoin content creators to do their stuff. So we have this thing called the Writer's Block. We're going to start that up again, either next week or this week. And what that is, basically we get 5 to 7 writers in a room and we help a content creator break a story, be it a documentary, be it a first TV show episode, be it a YouTube story, but help them break this story on their content so that way they can continue to run. Because at the end of the day, doing it by yourself is soul sucking and very challenging. And if you can get 5 to 7 really great minds into a room for 2 hours to focus on your idea and push it up the hill, the amount of momentum and stuff you can get coming off of that is absolutely incredible. And so trying to do that, um, have the Fix the Money Films documentaries that we're working on, which are going to be 5 documentaries. If you can fix the food, you can fix the healthcare, you can fix the education, you can fix the politics, and you can fix the economy. So you can fix all those things. You can fix the
Brilliant.
world, and trying to get those done. If we can aggressively or aim towards the halving, which is very rapidly running across us, that would be a goal to kind of get those things finished. But those things, trying to work on that, trying to get a bunch of other stuff up and running, working with some friends on some of their independent projects. There's a great podcast going to be coming out called The Village Idiot, which is a friend of mine working on that. This podcast with you, which has been fantastic. I know there's some people, I'm not sure what they want out there, but I know a couple other people who are trying to get some of the smaller content out there. So I think there's a lot of stuff percolating, a lot of stuff happening. But at the end of the day, trying to figure out the money part so we can get some people dedicated to just full-time focused on working on this. And then really trying to see how we can leverage those individuals for as many people as possible. That's kind of what we're currently at, how we're trying to move forward. And then just kind of where you can find me or us is, at Cypherpunk Cinema or Cypherpunk Cine on Twitter, at Cypherpunk Cinema on Nostr. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, really would love to hear from anyone and everyone in the entertainment space. If you're an animator, you're an editor, you're a writer, you're a director, what are you? Would love to connect with you. I'd love Cypherpunk Cinema to be that connective tissue for everyone in entertainment, to try and just connect, try and just kind of be friendly, kind of be that meeting point, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. We're all trying to push this thing uphill. It's a big beast. And the more we can change the myth, the more we can change the ethos, the more we can change the normie perspective and vernacular into talking about Bitcoin as the only cryptocurrency that matters, and get this divide between Bitcoin and crypto even wider, widen that chasm so we can have an intelligent conversation, the less bloodshed there will be. Because I think there's going to be some bloodshed before we get to a Bitcoin standard. And my personal goal is to limit that as much as I personally can.
Wow. Yeah, beautifully said. And I couldn't agree with you more at the end there. It's going to be worse before it gets better. And unfortunately, life shows us that, right? And anyone out there that feels so inclined to push the bright orange mission forward, we are all on the same boat. We're all on the same team, whether we're in Bitcoin right now or not. I mean, whether we all like it or not, we are all on the same team. We're on the same boat. We're trying to get into the Bitcoin life raft and get everyone over there as much as possible, so the least amount of people perish as the Titanic slips under the waves. So it is happening. It's happening slowly, so it's hard to see, but it is happening. So please reach out to JD. We'll obviously put his contact stuff in here as well, and reach out to him if you think you can help. And because obviously, JD, what you're doing, and people that are telling stories, film, cinema, art, memes, it's all going to be the thing that really drives popular culture and really drives us forward the most. So again, reach out to him, and thanks, brother, for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a blast, and we'll do this more obviously in the coming weeks and months here, and get updates and kind of dive deeper into some of these topics and get progress reports on what's happening. So I really look forward to doing that. So again, appreciate you coming on, dude.
Love it. Blast. Thanks, Brandon. This has been great. Later, everybody.
Wow. I really hope you enjoyed that. JD, again, is just an incredible mind, and I hope that you caught a glimpse of what he is doing and the person that he truly is, because he's one of the best people I know at just engaging people and talking to people, whether it's on camera, but in a room, in a crowd of people, or a group setting. He really is an engaging talker, an engaging person. And there's the old saying of people don't know what you, or don't care what you know until they know that you care. He's one of those people. I mean, he just truly is. Again, a lot of Bitcoiners are that way, quite honestly, but he's just one of those people that you feel like you've known him forever, and he just would do anything for you. He's done a lot to help me, and the books we're writing, children's books together, and helping do that, and ABCs of Bitcoin, stuff of that nature, but also Aladdin with Bitcoin trading cards, and many other people that JD has helped and is helping in the background. Thank God for Bitcoin doing many things behind the scenes that, again, it goes unnoticed. It's the selfless people out there that are really going to push forward freedom for all people. I liken it to my playing days, playing hockey, and you get a lot of guys that maybe we'd win an award or something would happen, and then inevitably you get credit going to the equipment managers and the trainers and all these background people, the doctors, all these background people that are doing so much for you, but literally never get any spotlight, no limelight, no love ever. And it's sad. I mean, I guess that's life, unfortunately. But I'm very grateful to be able to share JD and what he is doing, and a lot of the videos you see, a lot of the content you see. I know a number of the people that are putting out that kind of content, and boy, oh boy, are they really going to be the people that push forward this future in the mimetic warfare, in the videos, and telling the stories of what this transition from slavery to Bitcoin looks like, from fiat to Bitcoin, from centralization to decentralization. So I appreciate you watching this. Look for the links to JD to connect with him and what he's doing and his website, and also please share us out. Algorithm hates truth. Algorithm hates truth. And again, we are part of the value for value economy. So if you feel inclined, please tip us. We have our Lightning address there, and please share it out, because the algorithm hates truth. And the only way we are going to fight the algorithm is by sharing it out and overwhelming the system. So I appreciate you for being here with us here, checking out some playable characters that we have found, and we'll see you on the next one.